Hi, let's do a quick discussion on buying vacant land and how it differs from residential real estate. First of all, most real estate salespeople and or buyers generally don't know a whole lot about vacant land. The key things to be aware of when buying vacant land primarily are going to be the first thing you want to think about um, is it buildable? And by definition of buildable, we mean that you can put a septic system in. Now, there's a lot of different ways you could do a septic system, and I will get into that at another time. But um, your septic field does not necessarily have to be on site, but the bottom line is any listing agent on a property should have a good handle as to whether or not a property will be buildable. Um, Also, anything that is a site condominium subdivision had to have been pre-approved before it could be offered for sale. So part of the Condominium Act in doing a site condo requires that you um, have each site, individual site approved, and you can take a look at the condominium documents to verify that. If it's not, and let's say it's a city subdivision or a quote subdivision, meaning not a condominiumized subdivision, but a true subdivision, it may or may not be buildable, depends on when it was platted. If it was from the 70s and it's a 50 by 65 foot lot or 30 by 65 foot lot, there may not be enough land. If it has sewer available, then of course it doesn't matter how big the parcel is. But size of the parcel does not necessarily mean it will perk or it will not. I just use the term perk, which by the way is a term generally used for digging a 12-inch hole in the ground, filling it full of water and watching the water percolate down. We don't do those in northern Michigan. We do what's called a soil boring. And a soil boring is where they take an auger about 2, 3 inches, drive it into the ground 3, 4 feet, pull it up and look for they take a core sample of the dirt. And if it's all sand, then obviously it passes. But it has to, they'll squeeze the soil to see how much moisture's in it. And as long as it isn't too moist, then they'll allow it. But again, I'll get into that in more detail later. The second thing that you want to really think about is going to be the utilities. Is it going to have, again, we mentioned sewer for or septic. Is it going to have underground utility or underground power or overhead power? Is it already on site? How far is it from the property if it's not already there? And so electric and septic system are the two key things. The other thing, of course, is going to be propane or natural gas. Now, natural gas is going to be very, very rare unless you're really close to town or in a big subdivision. If you get into the outlying areas on some of these rural streets and roads, there's not going to be natural gas. So a good majority of the properties do have propane. If a buyer has a resistance to propane, then my common reaction is, look, there's plenty of um, very energy efficient homes now, energy efficient furnaces, things of that nature. So if a person were to build, which obviously they're going to build an energy efficient home. So the fact that it's propane is not necessarily a bad thing. It might not be a great thing in an existing home, but in a new home, it's not that big a deal, especially with today's energy codes. So those are the primary things. The next thing that you have to be concerned with is building and use restrictions. Now, there are restrictions that apply to the county, there are township restrictions, and then there may be restrictions specific to a subdivision or what are called deed restrictions specific to a given parcel of land. So, usually when I'm having a conversation with someone about vacant land, I will usually ask them, what is it you're looking to do with the property? Some people might want to raise farm animals, some people might want to have a kennel, a daycare, private residence. They might want to do outbuildings, barns, who knows? Um, Whatever the case, it's important to do preliminary research, see if you can find any restrictions online if they're associated with the um, listing online, And then the other option, of course, is to ask the listing agent if they have a copy of any restrictions. Worst case scenario, if the other agent does not know, you can also ask our title company here to pull any restrictions for a given subdivision, and they should be more than happy to do it. Other than that, those are the primary things. Let's talk about some other things that concerns that people have regarding vacant land. Um, the expense to have a site cleared to build. Generally speaking, most builders will include the cost of the excavation in the build job, and thus they're not going to get charged an arm and a leg for taking out some trees. They push them over with a bulldozer. They don't take a chainsaw and take them out individually. I've had people say to me, "Well, it cost me $1,000 to have a tree taken out of my backyard down in Grand Rapids, and that's going to cost a fortune to take out the trees here on this site." Not the case. Just remember that when you don't have anything to worry about hitting with the tree hitting anything, they just push them over with the bulldozer, cut them up, and the guys generally take them home and use them as firewood if the wood's decent at all. So not any real added expense. The last thing is going to be access, and by access I mean, is the property on a county road, a private road? Is there just an easement to get to the property, meaning it shows on the paper on a survey, but the road doesn't exist, meaning the buyer is going to be responsible? If the buyer is responsible for putting in the road, to what specifications does it have to be put in? It might be, if it only services one parcel, it can be maybe a 10-foot, 12-foot wide gravel road. If it services more than 4 parcels in Grand Traverse County, it very well will fall under the new road ordinance and have to be built to county road specs, which means it's going to be blacktop, and that can be extremely expensive. So when a parcel of land looks really inexpensive, that's something to consider. By the way, vacant land in the peak, in the heyday, in the 2005 range, acreage was about $10,000 an acre, and I'm not talking about a building site acreage. I'm talking 10 acres plus. Generally was running about at a high point about 10 grand an acre. A 40 cost you 400,000 undeveloped. Um, when it comes to individual lots, a building site in Grand Traverse County was 29 to $39,000 average, and I foresee them going back to those numbers here before too long. But building sites can be purchased $12,000 on up. Um, let's talk a little bit about financing. Vacant land can be financed. Generally, most people will say, I'm looking for a parcel of land, $50,000. And if you ask them, just out of curiosity, how did you arrive at that number? Well, that's how much cash I have. Well, that's a point where you might say, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there is bank financing available for vacant land. Typically 25% down in a 5-year balloon, I believe, is general time frame for vacant land. But when you make people aware that financing is available, sometimes it does change things. I want to add too, if a person is planning on building, if you ask them, when is it you plan on building? And they say, well, we're going to build in 6 months to a year. You want to make them aware that if they finance the house with the purchase of the land, in many cases, some cases, I should say, we can get financing for with zero down, which will include the first draw paying off the land. We just have to enter into a build contract with the builder. If they go the other route, buy the land, pay cash for it, then later go get financed, it could change the requirement of down payment that they need. If they put enough down on the land, then they probably won't need anything down. But if they finance the land and then want to go build, it could create a little bit of a issue with requiring more down payment than, let's say, a person might typically be used to. So anyway, that's a quick uh, uh, rundown of vacant land. Let me hit the key points again. Um, buildability, meaning septic system. Where's the electric? Is it propane or gas? What type of road access does it have? Is it private or county maintained? On that note, by the way, county maintained means the county takes care of it. Private means that there is going to be typically and hopefully a private road maintenance agreement. You want to ask if there is one that exists because whether it's an existing home or vacant land, that's important. And some lenders do require a copy of that document. And you'll find that some properties don't always include it. So anyway, that in the course of the restrictions. So you want to make sure that your client can do whatever it is they want to do on that given parcel of land. And that's a wrap.